Hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you're joining us from. Welcome to our Mandel webinar today, 3 common presentation failures and how to avoid them. So whether you're a salesperson looking to win more deals or a marketing person who's trying to create better ideas and present those in a more professional manner, or you're a training leader, regardless of where your background is or what you're coming from, we're excited to have you join us today and learn a few insights into a couple of ways where you can avoid some of these pitfalls and traps that tend to trip people up as they think about and get ready to make presentations. Just by way of quick housekeeping, we are recording our session today, and we will send you a link to the recording following our session, which you're welcome to watch again or share with others in your organizations who couldn't attend. I do want to make one little quick call out here. If you pay attention here to the GoToWebinar control panel that you're seeing, there's a section called Handouts. And I've uploaded a complimentary article that's related to the topic that we'll be talking about today. You can download that anytime during the presentation. We'll also send this to you following the presentation as well. Should you have any questions or issues as we go throughout the presentation, there's a question panel. Feel free to type those in and we'll try to get those answered as well. So we're also broadcasting this on social media. So for those of you that are out there in the social world and want to use hashtag Mandel now, M-A-N-D-E-L now, that would be great, and we'll have a back channel conversation regarding this webinar. So with that, I'm excited to introduce our presenter today. We're joined by Brad Holst, who is our VP of Strategy and Communications and is an amazing presenter in his own right. Done a variety of engagements with companies both large and small, has worked for Disney, Clorox, major Fortune 500 companies, and is just a really engaging and fun speaker. So I'm going to turn it over to him because we've got a short time here and let him jump right in. So Brad, are you there?
I am here, Paul. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you very much for everybody who made the choice to be here today, or if you're listening later on the recording, making time to do that. There's no more precious gift than you can give us than your time and attention. And let's try to make this half hour worth it for you. Let me just set a little context getting into this. Just tell you a little bit about Mandel Communications so you have some context to process the information I'm going to be sharing with you, whether it's valid or not, whether it's credible or not. And bottom line, we've been in business for over 20 years teaching people how to think better and then speak better so they get whatever results they need to achieve through their communications. And you know, for a business, this means things like being able to make better decisions faster, to keep people focused on the right things, and to execute with excellence. And we do this by building skills in 3 essential areas: teaching people how to present ideas and information, to influence others to action, and to collaborate more effectively and efficiently. Again, essential skills for what we look at going on in the world today. And we do this around the planet. So anything we share with you today works in San Francisco, where I'm based. It works in London, Amsterdam, Venice, Mumbai, Bangalore, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Sydney. Certainly localized for those areas, but everything we're going to be talking about today, when localized, works very effectively around the planet. But let's get to the reason why you chose to be here today. And you know, every day in countless meetings, held in countless conference rooms around the world, whether it's brick and mortar buildings or virtual rooms like we're into today, people are presenting ideas, they're making recommendations, they are raising warnings, they're giving updates, they're delivering training, and countless other topics with one goal. And that is they need to influence their audience to decide to do something. And maybe that's change their behavior or implement new ways of doing things. Maybe it's to approve, fund, or support something. Maybe it's to solve a problem or act on an opportunity. The challenge is most people in business, rather than make a decision, would prefer to do nothing. And this isn't because they're lazy. this isn't because it's a work ethic issue. What it is the fact that we humans are just kind of naturally resistant to change. You know, if the status quo is working well enough, we are very resistant, almost programmed to be resistant to resist change, resist people trying to influence to change, and just stick with the things we are. And in fact, some research in the sales world that I think is applicable just very broadly in business was looking, and this, by the way, was by Forrester. They were looking at deals that were forecasted to close. So these were deals that were quite far in the sales cycle, moving along nicely, expected to close. And depending on the organization they talked to, 20 to 60% of those resulted in no decision. They weren't lost to the competition. They weren't beat out by a better idea. It was the fact that the company decided to stick with the status quo. And when we talk inside organizations to decision makers, people in leadership roles, and in fact, think about your own experience. Think about how many meetings you've been in where people are trying to get you to do something, trying to get you to make a decision, and ultimately no decision is made and nothing happens. Well, in our experience, there's 3 major presentation failures that can cause it. And these may not be the presentation failures that you were expecting. These may be a little more subtle than what when you signed up for this webinar. But let me share these business presentation failures. The first is a failure of setting context. Most people try so hard to sell their idea that they forget they've got to sell the problem. And if you can't set context that makes the audience care and instead makes them go, meh, could care less, you're done. Secondly, oftentimes there's not enough value communicated about whatever change we're suggesting to really make it worth changing the status quo. So we have met context, a value issue. And the third is more not what you say, but how you say it. It's perception of lackluster confidence. Because people who are trying to influence, they're evaluating you. And if you don't sound like you believe in what you're talking about, neither are they. So let's drill down into each one of these. And let's start with that first one, that met context. And if you're not familiar with the term, as someone who's been in the presentation world and gives a lot of high-stakes presentations myself, this is the worst reaction possible. I'd rather have someone openly hostile to me than just feeling blasé, than feeling I could care less. And that's what meh means. You know, it can be an exclamation, it can be an adjective, but bottom line, it's expressing a complete lack of interest or enthusiasm. So somehow or another, we need to make people care. And let's think about how we humans, when someone's trying to influence, when someone's trying to get us to do something, to make a decision, how we go through that process. And if you recall back to just basic psychology, stuff that's been supported by studies just since this issue's been studied, almost every decision we humans make are based on either avoiding pain or gaining pleasure. Plain and simple. And if we drill down a little further, you'll probably remember that we humans are hardwired to avoid pain over gaining pleasure. Pain beats pleasure just about every time. Now, there's some contextual issues to this because there's a perception of this that really plays in here. So some things we need to think about in decision making is short-term versus long-term. Now, in the short term, well, let me say in the long term, our goal may be to be losing some weight, get a little more healthy. But in the short term, at 10 o'clock at night, we know there's that pint of Haagen-Dazs in the refrigerator. Guess which one wins? Or reversing that situation, maybe you've got some long-term plans that you know will be wonderful for your business, but there's a short-term hiccup that just causes you to cancel those plans and go a different direction. We also make decisions emotionally. Logic, facts, all critically important, all have to be there. But ultimately, when it comes down to making a decision, we not only have to feel right in our head, perhaps more importantly, in our gut, in our heart, we've got to believe this is the right thing to do. And finally, remember that we have these reptilian brains where our fight or flight reaction lives. And if we're in situations where our back is up against the wall, whether it's personally or business, whatever it is, survival trumps everything when we're making decisions. So clearly, pain beats pleasure when we're making decisions, which raises a really interesting question. Why do most business presentations focus on the gains, focus on the benefits, focus on the ideas? Why is that their primary focus there if it's really pain that causes us to make a decision? You're going to hear a common theme before running through this. You've got to be able to sell the problem, in which case your audience is going to eagerly want to hear the solution, the idea, the recommendation. My first experience with this was way back when I was working for Armor All Products after a fairly long career at Disney. And really for the first time in my career, I had regular access to people in C-level positions inside my organization. And the CIO and I, we came up with an idea that we just knew would have so much benefit for the organization. And so we got on our executive team's calendar. I still remember the meeting. We'd worked so hard to get ready for it. And Walt and I, Walt was the CIO, we came in, the CEO sat down, the rest of the executive team sat down. Boy, and we started talking about our idea and how wonderful it was and all the benefits it would get. And much to our shock, we didn't even get a lukewarm reaction. We got a tepid reaction from everybody. And it was really off-putting. I still remember it almost viscerally when it happened. And ultimately, no decision was made. The executive team decided to do nothing. And the lesson I learned that day, and boy, life has reinforced it every day, before you can pitch, you need to hitch. You need to hitch your idea to compelling context for your listeners, compelling context for the decision makers, compelling context for the people you need to decide. You've got to create a problem, an issue, an opportunity that gets their attention enough that then suddenly they're leaning forward and they want to hear your idea. And when you do that, and prepare to be amazed, I say tongue-in-cheek, you see that, your idea is just going to take off just how you wanted to do it. So the question really becomes then, though, what do I hitch to? What is it that I need to hitch my pitch to? And that's pretty simple. You need to hitch it to the things that your decision-making audience cares about. That means you need to do your homework. And by the way, this blob on the screen, don't judge me by my artwork, but that's supposed to be a human brain. And let's say conceptually, not anatomically, but conceptually, we divide that between a rational side and an emotional side. Remember, we make decisions, the rational side's very, very, very important, but ultimately the emotional side's got to weigh in on that. So let's divide it that way, and let's divide it also between individual needs and organizational needs. So when we're trying to think about what do people care about, typically on the rational side, individually, we're all looking for ways to help me do my job more effectively, more efficiently, make money, save money, mitigate risk, and pretty similar about how we're thinking about our organization, whether that's our work group or our entire company, whatever it may happen to be, how can we better meet our functional needs? Bottom line, we're really looking here value for the dollar, return on investment for what we need to do. The emotional side's a little different. On the emotional side, we're looking for things, God, can you make me look better? Can you help my career? Can you make me feel good? Can you make me sleep better at night? And organizationally, we're really looking to both build and protect our organization's reputation. So we're really looking for there, not so much the value for the dollar, but someone we can trust, someone who has our best interests in mind. So your job when you're trying to get people to do something is to understand the things they care about. And another way you might do that is to think about, relative to your topic, relative to what you're talking about, what can you link to? A situation for your listening audience, the people you're trying to influence, some situation that's top of mind for them that links to their project. What is that? What's going on there? And then you need to think about, okay, what insights can I bring to bear that creates a complication for my audience based on that situation, a challenge, a change, something that starts to get their attention. And I need to continue that thinking out, both logically and emotionally, to think about, okay, what concern can I express about an implication of that complication that really gets my listeners' attention? So these are the things you need to think about. It's also literally in the first first minute of a presentation what you need to be talking about. You need to link to that situation. And you know what? You should see audience heads nodding because you're talking about something that's important to them. You start raising that complication. You should watch their eyebrow arch or other, I'm interested. This is, I'm not sure this is good. And by the time you get to the implication, you're hoping to see, and I'm only exaggerating a little bit, but you're hoping to see that involuntary shudder or a little bit of a clench as they hear that. So you're trying to create both logically a problem and emotionally a problem. And the secret sauce to this, the secret sauce is it's got to be all about them. You've got to have done your homework. If you make it generic, it equals no decision. It equals nothing. So this is how you hitch to their careabouts. We have a tool at Mandel called the Blueprint, and it's a communication thinking framework and ultimately a speaking framework. And the very top line, the most important line in the tool, is thinking about that situation, complication, implication. What are you going to hitch to? Okay, now here's the good news. If they buy into that problem, you've got their attention, they're almost going to demand to hear your idea. Of course, this also brings us to what our next failure is. And of course, that's not creating enough value versus the status quo, again, resulting in nothing. So when you're differentiating against the status quo, what do you need to think about? Well, you've got to think about your idea, your recommendation, whatever it is you're talking about, and the more you can position it in an eye-opening way, almost like it's impossible, the better. And when I say impossible, I'm not saying like magic. I'm not saying in a way that would not be credible. But remember, the people you need to influence live in the world they live in. They work in the box that they live in. They know what they know. And if you can position new thinking, you know, they've been living with problems because they just thought it was part of cost of doing business. If you can position new thinking, it's almost like, wow, I didn't know that was possible. Then you need to think about what are the actions you need your listeners to take. And don't ask for too much too soon. You know, going right to being funded or a major change, most cases may be too much. So think about what are those baby steps actions that get you where you need to go that are going to be acceptable to your listener. And then following that logic through, if you're asking for action, what benefit is there for your listeners? And the more you can position that as an investment that's going to have a return for the people you're talking to, the better. And by the way, these things that you're thinking about then become the second minute of your presentation. Remember, right up front, we're hitching them to our context with our situation, complication, implication. Here we're going position, action, benefit. And what happens when we share the position is eyes open and maybe minds open. They may be skeptical about what you're talking about, but they're listening. Then, since it's baby steps actions, like, you know, I'd like you to consider, I'd like you to review and ask questions versus I'd like you to fund, their guard drops. They're suddenly now more interested and actually engages with you because it feels safer. And of course, when we position the benefit as an investment with an ROI, we start shifting their thinking from short-term to long-term. All benefit here. But just like the last three things we looked at, it's got to be all about them. This can't be generic. It can't be canned. Generic equals nothing. And again, if we look at the Blueprint tool, that's the next line. Top line is the hitch. Second line is what we pitch, position, action, benefit. And the rest of the tool then helps you think through what it is you need to discover and ultimately recommend. So for example, you might want to dig deeper into your listener's world so you can really answer in a compelling way. Why this? Whatever it is you're talking about, why this? Why now? Why me? Why my team? Why my company to do it? And then you can build out the rest of the talk. Things you need to think out to communicate enough value to get people to change. But there's one more differentiator too. And it's not just the content, it's the person who's delivering the content. That's you. That's the messenger. And, you know, under pressure, it's like our personality leaves our body and we lose our confidence. And that's noticeable when it's happened. So let's look at that problem of lackluster confidence and the role it plays here and what you can do about it. Let's start with a little research from Sirius Decisions. They did a study a while back of 140 senior executives that classically assigned to people that make decisions all the time. And when someone's pitching an idea, making a recommendation, coming with them, trying to do something, they had some very big expectations. You know, scoring 90% or more in terms of importance, they wanted you to know their business issues. They wanted you to have done their homework on what the things they care about, and they want you to know the world they work on. And by the way, if you've done your homework and you know this about your audience, you're talking to one or many, boy, the confidence that comes from that is just amazing. Sadly, the same people, their reality is not a good one. 75% of the time, the people pitching to them were not prepared. They did not know enough about the care abouts. And basically, a result of that just showed up and throwed up. And you know what? You can guess what the result was? It's nothing. And I go back to you. If you haven't done your homework, how are you ever going to feel confident physically? And if you're looking like this when you're presenting, and by the way, we see this type of posture all the time. Matter of fact, we hardly even consciously notice it, but unconsciously we do. This is a stress posture. This creates stress in your body. It creates stress for your listeners. We mirror each other. Suddenly you see that posture back to us. This is non-verbal self-sabotage. So if we think about what is the benchmark for good presentations today, it's TED Talks. And it's not only TED Talks, it's the top-rated ones. Some of the TED Talks, honestly, aren't great, but the top-rated ones are. And so we're really expecting the top presenters to really come up in here and just be completely engaged, open postures. You can see the conviction in what they're talking about. Their voice, their face, their body language, all congruent with it. And there's one other big thing that's part of this. Here's one of the most significant pitches that's been made in the past 10 years. And this is a transcript of Steve Jobs introducing the iPhone. Considered one of the great presentations of our time. Now, if you're looking at this, you probably notice, wow, there's no punctuation, there's no capitalization, there's a complete absence of white space. And of course, it makes it really hard to read. Now, we're obviously not talking about passing out a handout and having people read it, but let's make an analogy to that. When we're speaking, is this any better? Can you imagine Steve Jobs? Yeah, every once in a while, you know, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything, right? And so, I mean, it's hard to imagine. I mean, by the way, Steve Jobs was not born a master presenter. He worked hard to get there. But bottom line, one of the most powerful ways that you can be confident and appear confident is to get comfortable with pausing. Use pauses as little micro moments to think instead of ums and ahs and unnecessary filler words. Use pauses as an opportunity to breathe, to take a breath, to get some power behind your voice and really minimize your stress that you may have about it. And then use pauses to punctuate. Pauses are the punctuation of our spoken language. And I'll tell you, if there's one delivery skill that's maybe the most profound to me, it's getting comfortable pausing, getting comfortable with silence and getting rid of all those clutter and filler words that get in the way of pausing and get in the way of being composed. Ultimately, if we think about how this plays out, when it's you, whether you're in business, whether you're in sales, whether you're in technology, whether you're in healthcare, wherever you may happen to work, when you're trying to influence others to make a decision, you need to make three things happen, and they happen almost at the same time. Remember, these presentations are a moment of truth. You don't get really do-overs. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So in that moment of truth, you've got to be understood. If people can't follow along, if you're using too much jargon, too many acronyms, too many things they're not familiar with, just hard to follow based on your delivery or your structure, they check out. What do people do today? They check out on their smart device, onto their phone, onto their tablet, onto their computer, because we can. They're there. But if we understand, we're immediately looking for value. Where's the value to me? Where's the value to the organization? And you know what? If you're understood and you're communicating really compelling value, you're well on your way, but it's still not enough to get your audience to do the something that you want them to do. They've also got to feel like, wow, I can trust you. I find you credible. And guess what? You don't have much time to make this happen. We thin slice, so literally right in the first 30 seconds, Am I understanding you? Am I already starting to see value? Do I feel like you can trust? You've got to do it right from the beginning and sustain it on through your talk if you want your listeners to do something. So you could kind of say what we do at Mandel, if you want to think about it this way, is we give the skills and tools to make that happen consistently, to make you moment of truth ready. So again, when we think about what we do at Mandel, and I think you've gotten a taste of how you can do it yourself, you've got to think effectively, to speak effectively, to get the results that you need to deliver. For your organizations to have the things happen that make them a much more efficient, much more effective organization. And it requires these three essential communication skills to do that. And Paul, before I wrap up, I wonder if you just wanted to remind everybody of what we have for them and maybe some next steps for them.
Yeah, you bet. And Brad, I know we've done a few webinars, but I always learn, and we've done them on the same topics, but I always feel like I learned something new. And that example of Steve Jobs and the pausing, it's such good reinforcement. So I know I've learned, and I'm always more self-conscious of my uhs and ums every time I have to speak, but it's really good reinforcement. So,
hey, thank you, Paul.
Just a couple
quick.
You bet. Just a couple quick things, and then I'll turn it right back to you to wrap us up here, because I know we're coming to the top of the hour. But as I mentioned when we started, in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel, there's an article called Credible Messaging, and this is complimentary. You can download it here. We'll also go ahead and send this to you along with the recording following today's session. So that's just a thank you for attending today and spending some time with us, and it's related to what we've been talking about. If you want to go to the next slide, we also invite you to visit the Mandel website. We've got a lot of really good new content there. This is a place for you to kind of take a deeper dive into what you've learned today. We've just barely scratched the surface of the skills that are taught in the training programs. But we've got more white papers and resources. We've got a new voice of the customer section, so don't take our words for it. You can listen to how Brian from Hewlett-Packard has utilized Mandel to really change the dynamic of the way they present and how it has helped them to win more in the marketplace. You can also find dates for upcoming workshops, whether you're interested in attending personally to develop your skills, or if you're thinking about maybe this would be great for your team or organization to go through. So check that out as well. So again, mandel.com for a variety of resources there. So with that, Brad, I'm going to turn it back to you to wrap up with a final thought for today.
Hey, thank you, Paul. And again, thank you to everyone who carved out the time to be here today. I see there's still over 200 people that are together, and I am just humbled by that. As you probably guessed, I have a lot of passion for what I do. And in fact, I've been blessed to make my living doing something I love for over 15 years now, and that's helping people get the ideas in their head to come out of their mouth so that people understand, see value, and trust. And one of the things that I've learned from this time is when you put in the time and energy needed to build the skills that you need to stand up to present and be heard, it really transforms your whole self-perception. You know, the ramifications go beyond just being able to deliver a business or a sales presentation. What I see is that people get this whole new infectious self-confidence, this inner strength that just seems to follow them everywhere they go. It's, it's like going to the gym after you've been working out for 3-4 weeks and starting the body feels stronger again and it follows you everywhere. It's very much the same thing. And it gives you just incalculable benefit, both in your career and your personal life. And that's why, I hope you'll feel like I do, that one of the best investments in yourself, one of the best investments in your professional skills that you can make is to really build high-level presentation skills. And it is something that can be learned and done. And I just hope that if you haven't done that already, at some point in the future, you'll make that happen for yourself. You'll never regret it. And with that, thank you so much again, one more time for joining us today, and hope our paths cross sometime in the future. Thanks again.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, everybody. This will go ahead and conclude our broadcast. Be on the lookout for those resources we promised either later today or tomorrow. Thanks for your time, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions about what we've talked about today. Thanks, everybody. We'll sign off for now. Have a great rest of your day.